Come join us each week as we dive into topics about the joys and the struggles of motherhood. By no means are we experts. We're practically flying by the seat of our pants, or should I say, mom jeans. On this podcast, you will find a judgment-free zone where we discuss not only the best parts of being a mom, but the not-so-glamorous parts too. You can expect unfiltered, real mom talk, humor, grace, and a sense of sisterhood. What makes our podcast unique is that we understand there's no one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to being a mother. We're not going to pretend that we know everything too, because we definitely don't. We just want a place to share our stories with you. Thank you so much for tuning in to Mom Jeans, trying to fit into motherhood.
Earlier this week, there was an Alabama Supreme Court ruling that could have a lasting impact on fertility treatments, specifically IVF. If you're interested in learning more about the current legislation regarding fertility treatments, please visit www.resolve.org.
Welcome back to Mom Jeans. This is our third episode. Last episode, we went through getting pregnant from me, Lisa, Danielle, and Michelle. And this week, we are going to go through Leah's journey. Leah's journey was a little longer than ours, and she went through a lot of testing, sometimes painful testing, and a long road through IVF. And I'm super excited to hear about this. Before we get her story, we're going to kind of just do a quick check-in on everybody and how everybody's week was and what we're going through. I know us up in northern Arizona are getting slammed by snow right now, and we're dealing with snow days for our daycare, which is so fun. So anybody else want to check in on that?
Well, we all had a snow day called for today, and then at about 6 o'clock tonight, we all got a snow day called for tomorrow as well. Each one of us is trying to navigate through that. You know, Lisa, you've got both of your girls at home. Michelle, you've got your daughter and your in-laws and your husband recovering. You've got a full house over there. I'm pretty sure Wes is going through some sort of growth spurt because today he ate 5 meals and 5 bottles and was still incredibly fussy, of course, during the only call that I actually needed to be present for. But we made it through, and we'll do it all again tomorrow. We did throw Wes in the snow for the first time today, so that was super fun for us, not really for him. And then we went out and bought a snowblower, knowing how much snow is on the way tonight.
We move up here and we all love snow, but that was before we all had kids under 2 years old who need constant attention and ideally daycare. I'm trying to embrace it. I did wake up. I opened the window, saw Lisa's house, but then also saw the beautiful trees and the snow. So try to have a moment, but then, yes, it was a full house. It was chaos, but also feeling very grateful. We had lots of hands on deck today to support while I had work calls or things came up or to give each other breaks. I'm very grateful for that. Other than that, I had a chance to go on a little girls trip this weekend out of town. It was really hard to leave Sierra and, everybody, but it was really nice to get some time just away and to give myself a moment to reset. Like I didn't quite realize how much I needed it. It shows from my Aura ring because I slept like 9.5 hours both nights I was gone. So I think also getting some caught up on sleep was also really important. Anyways, doing okay this week and chugging through, and I'm at almost 12 weeks pregnant. So we're just doing all the things all at once. Exciting. Danielle, what's it like up in your neck of the woods?
It is snowing here in Montana, but there is no snow days for school at all. It can be negative 55 and 2 feet of snow, and they still, they're definitely going to school, preschool still open, daycare, all the things. Nothing shuts down here, but I got to enjoy the snow because I am home, so that's been nice. I've been going to some workout classes in the morning with other moms, and they bring their kids, and we have like a stroller set up of all the kids as they watch the moms work out. So that's been kind of fun. I've been getting out of my shell and getting out of the house to meet other moms, and I'm starting to make gym friends. Like they're saying, "Hi, Danielle," and I'm like, "Oh, hey." It's just been nice to get out to meet some other moms that are also staying homes, because it can get very isolating, especially when it's snowy and I'm mostly stuck inside. But things are going great.
That's awesome. Sounds like a cool group.
That is awesome. I wondered what you guys did with the kids when you went.
They do have a play area, and really Weston's not kind of ready to be over there because it is kind of off to the side with older kids, the older kids that the moms bring. So the little babies and about Weston's age too, they just sit in the strollers and watch. And everyone compliments how chill he is. Like, he's so chill. I'm like, it's really his nap time. He's just ready for a nap. And he's just kind of in a daze watching people jump around or like lift weights, and I wave at him as we go by. We do a circuit type workout. He's just chilling. But by the time we leave, he's like, Mom, I need a nap. He doesn't say that obviously, but you can tell.
Is he close to saying any words?
He says mama and dada, but not like on demand. He just kind of makes those noises. I will say I think he can say no. And it's not because I'm saying no to him. I'm mostly saying no to my dog because my little dog barks all the time. And I'm like, no, like, stop barking. And so he knows what it means because he shakes his head. And then sometimes he'll go, no. So great. That's your first word is no.
Well, they pick up on that so much because whenever Hank, our dog, comes around, Hannah goes, "Go on, Hank," because I say that all the time, and I'm like, oh man, I feel so bad.
What about Wesson?
I think he's starting to intentionally say mama. I haven't put 100% stamp on it. I don't know. Maybe I'm making it up in my mind and I'm just wishing for it. But I think he's there. And there was a day, it's funny that you said the no thing. There was a day that I asked him if he wants to go to bed, and he does sign language. So he will do bed. He will do more, all done, milk. But I asked him if he wanted to go to bed one day, and he just said no. And I don't think it was intentional, but the timing was so perfect that Stephen and I just thought it was hilarious. So I think maybe mama, but that's really about it.
But they say that sign language is like full communication. Like that counts as words when we went to the pediatrician.
I was just telling Lisa today, like, Sierra's got a few words down. She's got like only 2 signs and she uses them for everything. So she says, she can do all done, but she also uses that for like, I'm bored of this. I'm also, which is kind of all done, but like saying goodbye, which is kind of all done. But then she'll just use it randomly, and then she starts offending people holding her. She's like, I'm all done being held by you, right? Trying to get to more, and then she just claps. So she claps for when she's excited about things. She claps when she wants more. So it's kind of in the same vein. Her first word was apple. She doesn't quite say it like the word apple. When we were in North Carolina, she started saying it, and then I didn't think it was like, I was like, this is cool. She's repeating what I'm saying. And then we were at a hotel and I had an apple in my hand and she was like, apple. Like, it was so cool for her to see it and notice it. And then we're getting moms and dads, which is just really cool. We were actually in a grocery store the other day and Ryan came around the corner and she goes, hi, Dad. Like, not perfectly like that, but it was like such a cute moment. And there was a store clerk standing there and we're all freaking out. It was a cute moment. So
You guys are way ahead of schedule. Hannah, I just looked up. Hannah's first word wasn't until 13 months. So you guys are killing it.
no, we're not. No one's killing it or behind or whatever. All these babies are just like doing their own thing.
Oh man, got a different app this time for tracking like milestones. And not that I'm tracking them, but like it gives good tips. So I was like, oh, I'm gonna keep going with it. And it's like talking about all these things that Aubrey should be doing. And I was like, nope, nope. But with Hannah didn't hit any of the milestones on those apps either. And it's like she's doing awesome, and I'm not concerned about her development 1% right now. So it's such a, I mean, we've talked about this before. It's you put so much emphasis on those, and you're like, oh my gosh, my kid's not okay, and da 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 da, and it's really silly. Silly we do that.
And it's also like just in that situation, right? Like I was like, do I even say she's speaking words, right? Like I don't want to make all of our babies about the same age, right? Like, and so it's a weird situation to be in all these things, right? Where every baby's doing their own pace. Like I wish my child slept better. And I'm envious of all your good sleepers over here, right? So they're all going to have their different highs, different lows, different things that are moving. And it's complicated, right? Like it's such a layered thing, but I just think all our babies are awesome and they're all doing their own thing when they want to do their own thing. That's what's great.
Well, I thought it was adorable because I picked up Wes the other day and Cece was sitting by the door and I was like, "Hi, Cece." And she's like, "Hi." And I was just like, it was so cute. And it just warmed my heart. And I was like, okay, this is precious.
Yeah, and yesterday the other day at drop off, I walked in, she stared right at Wes, and she's like, "Hey!" And it was her first drop offs where she didn't cry when I left, so that was big. And I think it was because of Wes. So they're buddies. Sounds like they play peekaboo all the time. Anyways, we went through all that saga, and Lisa, we did not hear what's up in your world. Check in. How are things with you?
What's Hannah's new favorite habit?
Peeing on things. Just kidding. I'm trying to think of what we've got going on. We've started daycare for Aubrey. We were talking about that and trying to get her to take a bottle because she will not take a bottle for us. And they claim to get her having bottles, so that's a huge relief. I went back to work on Monday, only had 2 days of work, and then snow days here, so that's good. Transitioning back, and then looking into again putting the wagon in front of the horse. What's the saying? Anyway, thinking about trying to donate some breast milk, kind of exploring that whole thing. So I'll have check-ins on that if I end up exploring that and doing that. We bought a chest freezer to store, so that's, adulting so hard. So excited about that. And Aubrey is recovering really well from RSV, so that's great. She's hardly coughing at all, and her congestion is basically gone. So that was a huge relief because you just never know how that's going to hit each kid. About it. We ready to jump into Leah's story?
Does everybody have wine?
No, but I have ice cream.
Equally as good.
Have my sleepy time tea.
All right. Lisa, you got any goods over there?
Pizza. Just eating some pizza.
Okay. Well, you guys all have my favorite things, so we're good. Well, thank you for giving me the space to share. I don't know how this is going to flow. I don't know how it's going to come out. I don't know how well I'm going to express myself, but I think for myself, when I was going through everything that I was going through, I felt so alone and I felt really isolated. I didn't know anybody who was dealing with infertility, and I found comfort in some random girls I started following on Instagram who were struggling with things, and I found comfort in weird ways. And when Stephen and I first started to face this journey, we were pretty private about it. And if I had one thing that I could change about the whole process going back, that would be to share more and talk about it more with others, because Lisa, as Brandon said tonight, maybe it'll be very therapeutic for me to talk like this. It is, and it was once I started talking about it. And I have to give credit to Stephen for that, because he was the one that really pushed both of us to talk to others about it. Yes, we got to IVF, and I'll get to how we got there, but our first round of IVF, I honestly think out of my closest group of friends, Lisa may have been only one or two people who actually knew that we were going through it. And our parents knew an extent of what we were going through, but we were very private, and it made it a lot more challenging. And so by the time we moved past that first round, we decided we're going to be open and honest with everybody, just lay it out on the table. And the amount of support that we got from people around us, from people who'd never been through anything like this, was overwhelming. And that's really what got us where we were. I had an IUD, and I got my IUD out in January of 2020. Honestly, I really thought that I was going to get pregnant right away because my mom was very fertile. Nobody in our family really had any issues. The first couple of months, we were trying, not really doing anything too seriously. I kind of started to get surprised as each month passed that we weren't pregnant, because I did. I held that expectation and thought process that, oh, we would get pregnant right away. Like, there was no reason that we wouldn't get pregnant. And so after a couple months, I did go and I bought ovulation strips. My ovulation was very regular, very consistent, didn't indicate that anything would have been off. And since we are a little bit older in age, kind of after that 6-month mark, I decided to start talking to my doctor. And so we started running some tests back in November of 2020. And we saw a couple things that could be potentially impacting my fertility. I do have an autoimmune disease, and I've had that for a long time. But then we also noticed that my thyroid was a little underactive, and that can play into your fertility. So my doctor got me on some thyroid medicine pretty quickly, and my thyroid regulated pretty quickly. So we were happy to see that, and we were hoping that that would result in us getting pregnant. I continued to meet with my doctor. I actually started going to acupuncture on a regular basis as well. And I started to kind of subscribe to everything under the sun of what you can do to get pregnant. Every position, like we talked about last week. I was in legs up the wall for an hour every single time. We changed it up. We did everything that we could, thinking that, maybe those things would help. And then did get an HSG, and hysterosalpingogram, like we talked about last week with Danielle. And for me, that was top 3 most painful experiences of my life. I apparently have a very small cervical opening. And in order for them to get the dye up through my cervix into my tubes, they actually had to come in there and put a clamp on my cervix to open it up to get it in there. And I definitely blacked out. I definitely screamed hysterically, but we got it. We got the test done.
I remember you telling me about that, and I got sick to my stomach listening to that part.
Being in a small town, one, with the HSG, you have to get it done a certain time of the month. And then being in a small town, you only have so many options for doctors and places to go get things done. So I had one, which was our hospital. And I think I scheduled my HSG in December, and I actually wasn't able to get it done until March. And so I had to schedule it based off of when I thought I was going to be on that certain part of my cycle. So March came and I wasn't at the right part of my cycle, so I had to push it back again. It was just a nightmare to get scheduled. And so we got there and they took me back, and I told Steven, I was like, you can wait in the waiting room. It's fine. No big deal. But it was like a really intense, almost looking like surgical room. And so I didn't know what exactly the procedure was going to be when I walked in there. I was like, whoa, this is a little bit more overwhelming than I expected. So they get me on the table and the doctor's trying to do it. And he's like, I can't do it. I'm sorry. You're going to have to come back. And I was like, absolutely not. I cannot come back. I've been waiting months to get this test done. And as you know, like each month that passes that you're not getting pregnant, it causes more stress, anxiety, sadness, the whole gamut of emotions. And so I was like, absolutely not. I'm not leaving. You're going to get this done. And so he's like, well, we can see if this other doctor can do it. And that's when he walked in and he's like, I'll get it done, but you're not going to like it. And I was like, fine. And he's like, I'm going to clamp your cervix. And I was like, okay, that sounds terrible, but let's do it. So anyways, they did it, got the dye. My tubes weren't tied. All that to be said, most of the women I've talked to have not had as torturous of an experience as I have. So if anybody listening has to go get an HSG, please don't be terrified by my experience, because I know many women who have gone through it and it has been fine and they've just taken a Tylenol and that's it. But that was when I first learned that I have a small cervical opening. Lisa, I actually think you were the one who told me that your nurse asked you if you were a runner because you had a small cervix as well.
Yeah, during my 3 hours of pushing, which we'll get to in another episode, they were like, yeah, your cervix is just really small, so she's just banging up against you.
So I've been a runner. And so I was like, when they told me I had a small cervix, I was like, oh my gosh, it's because I'm a runner. Obviously, that's not scientifically speaking, but that's all that I could think of that went through my head. My tubes are fine. So that was April of 2021. So once I got those test results and everything, and we still weren't pregnant, I actually ordered a book about natural fertility. And maybe we can add it in the show notes because it is a book that I do recommend. It's called It Starts with the Egg, for anybody going through fertility. And for me, I bought into every single thing that was in the book. Now, I've talked to others who've read the book and they've clipped snippets out of it, done half of it, done none of it, subscribed to whatever. But for me, nothing was working. And so I was like, we're just going to throw it all at the wall and see what sticks. So then we did some more lab work. And after about 8 weeks of not hearing results from my lab work, I found out that they actually lost my blood samples. Again, this was lab work that had to be done at a certain part of your cycle. Most fertility lab work does have to be done at a certain point. And so after 8 weeks of not hearing any results, found out that they had lost my lab work, and I had to wait another month to get additional lab work done. And this lab work was really trying to determine my AMH levels. And I'm not going to spell out what AMH stands for because I will butcher it, but you can look it up, AMH. And AMH is an indicator of your egg quantity and quality. Once I did go back, and that was around August, to get the blood work done again, my AMH levels came back very, very low, especially for our age. We were diagnosed with diminished ovarian reserve, which is having that low egg count and egg quality, closer to the age, quality, and quantity that you would expect somebody on the verge of menopause having. And so that was really hard. Now, none of these test results are a guarantee of if you will or will not get pregnant. They're just information that help you kind of navigate through your path. We decided to try and find a fertility doctor, which there are none in Northern Arizona. I guess there used to be one, and I don't know how long ago he stopped practicing. So we looked around at a couple in Phoenix. One of the ones that had come recommended to us had a wait list for like 6 months. And then we actually just happened to stumble across the clinic that we ended up going with. And so we called in August, made an appointment for September to get a consultation. We didn't really know what path we were going to go down. Like, we knew surface level about all of our test results, but we didn't know the in-depth. We didn't know the doctor's perspective. We got our consultation, and then I believe it was a Monday morning in September, and we're on the phone with the doctor. And he had asked me what part of my cycle I was at. And he was like, okay, well, if you come down today, we could actually start you on a medicated cycle today. So we literally did our consultation, jumped in the car, drove 2 hours to Phoenix to go in and start this process. He reviewed our test results with us, and he said, let's do a couple medicated cycles, and then we can see what the next step might be.
How far into the journey are you at this point?
So we started in January of 2020, and this is September of 2021.
Wow. So year and over a half at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
So we jumped in the car, we drove down there, and we went and we got an ultrasound to see what my follicles were doing, if they were growing properly, and if it really was a possibility that we could go through a medicated cycle. And so, as Danielle shared on the last episode, the medicated cycle is to try and help you ovulate better, or in my case, they were hoping that I would drop more than one egg through a medicated cycle, with increasing our chances of conceiving. I did Clomid, which is a little bit different than letrozole, but they essentially act the same way. And then I had to do a trigger shot, and that's where the timed intercourse came in. So I did the trigger shot, and then it was exactly, I think, 18 hours later that we were to have the timed intercourse, and they gave us an hour time frame to do that. And then we had to go back down to Phoenix to do the blood draw for the pregnancy test, because in fertility treatments, they do all of the pregnancy tests via blood draw. We did that, and unfortunately, we got the test results. I remember exactly them calling me. I was in one of my team meetings, and I stepped out to take the call, and they had said that we weren't pregnant. And again, throughout this whole process, I really, really, really believed we were going to get pregnant naturally. Like, through everything, I never doubted in my mind that we would get pregnant naturally. And so I was really surprised that wasn't the case. And they asked if we wanted to do another Medicaid cycle the following month. And so we did. Same situation, same outcome. Weren't pregnant from that second month. And that's when we had a conversation with our doctor. And based off of our test results and my diagnosis of the DOR, diminished ovarian reserve, he recommended that we skip IUI and we just go to IVF. And the reasons for that is because with diminished ovarian reserve, IUI really doesn't increase your chances at all for pregnancy, because the issue isn't the sperm getting to the egg. The issue is the egg. So he advised us to go straight to IVF.
And can you just do a quick reminder, what's IUI versus IUF?
IUI is intrauterine insemination, and I like to refer to it as the turkey baster method. Basically, they take the man's sample. There's different steps that they do it at different clinics, but the A to B, right, is that they take the man's sample and they suck it up into a tube, and then they stick it in the woman. And the point of that is to help the sperm get to the egg faster, or to help more sperm get there and kind of bypass the journey of the sperm swimming and just make it a direct shot. IUI is very successful for many people. And then for IVF, and in fact, I remember being completely mortified because I really didn't know too much about IVF when we were talking to our doctor about it. But we were on a Zoom call just like this. And he said, he walked us through the process of it. And he's like, yeah, so we have this needle that's this long that goes in and gets the eggs. And I think he saw my face die over Zoom because he was like, oh, no, you're under anesthesia. And I was like, well, maybe you start with that. Don't lead off by telling me there's a 15-inch needle that's going to go inside of me. Like, I definitely laugh about it now. That was how he started the conversation. And so the process is that you take injections to increase your follicle count and growth. Then they go in and have the intention of retrieving multiple eggs to fertilize multiple eggs to create embryos. So I wasn't super into the idea of IVF. It kind of scared me quite a bit because there's all of the injections, the hormones. Living not near the clinic, we had to be at the clinic every other day while going through monitoring for IVF. And so I wasn't super thrilled on it, but at the same time, we had hit a roadblock. And I'm somebody who believes in things aligning and timing to an extent, and signs and things of that sort. And the fact that we were able to get in so quickly and kind of the first cycle, the timing was right there. And I just kind of took it as, okay, well, this is going to be our next step. And Stephen was all on board, and we wanted to do whatever we could to raise our family. The IVF conversation was in December of 2021. So it had almost been 2 full years of trying to get pregnant. And after 2 years of every month, just heartbreak and sadness and questioning, it was like, well, we got to try something new, right? Let's do it. So we started our first cycle in January. I didn't know exactly what we were getting into. By this point, actually, I had been connected with one of my sorority sisters who went through IVF. And I didn't know that she had gone through IVF. It was actually through another friend who was like, hey, Kelly went through IVF. Maybe you should reach out and talk to her. And so she was somebody who I found a lot of support in, and I'm so grateful for to this day, because she was somebody who knew what was going on. And now she went through it for different reasons. There's lots of reasons people go through IVF, but I found a lot of support in her. And ironically, we also reconnected over Instagram. I'm not a huge social media person, but through this process, that's where I found, I guess, the most amount of people that I could really relate to. I don't exactly remember all of the details of my first couple of appointments during our first cycle, but I wanted to say, when you go through IVF, your clinic makes a calendar for you. And it's very overwhelming and very confusing because there's so many different medications that you have to take, and they're all listed each day and your dosages change throughout the cycle. We actually have this picture of all of the medications on our kitchen table, and it took up the entire table. And that was for just one round of IVF. So we had injections every morning and every night. You have to take them at the same time. So it was 7 a.m. every morning and 7 every night. And I had, I think it was 3 injections, and then I had pills as well, and actually suppositories too. And each clinic does it differently, and each cycle is different. And that's the one thing, is that the doctors will work with everybody to tailor the medications exactly how you need them. Even throughout my cycle, you would do a blood draw every couple of days, and they would tailor my medications based off of the results of the blood draw, tailor the dosages. So what I do remember about our appointments is that they were very much a roller coaster. We would go to one appointment and we would see that we had 6 follicles, which for DOR is great. That's 6 potential eggs. We'd go to the next appointment, my follicle count would be down to 4. Then we'd go and it'd be up to 7. And so these are every other day for about 2 weeks. And we actually pushed our egg retrieval 3 days because my follicles were they weren't growing at the same pace. So they were different sizes. And they really want to see, what they really want to see is that your follicles are all around the same size. There's a certain size that they want the follicles in between that they can anticipate there being a mature egg in the follicles. There's always the chance that a follicle is empty and that there's not actually any as well. Eventually, we got to the point where we were going to go for a retrieval. My clinic had a requirement to have at least 3 follicles in retrieval. They wouldn't perform the retrieval if you 3 mature looking follicles, let me clarify that. So we had 4, and we were like, and they couldn't extend my cycle any longer. And so we pushed it up to the last day. So we went in for the egg retrieval. The egg retrieval is a whole other situation. So you walk in, my clinic was very nice. I really enjoyed it. And they take you back to like a doctor's office room where you would get an exam. And you sit in there and you wait, and they have you sign all of these documents because you're going under general anesthesia for the retrieval. I haven't been under anesthesia, so I was absolutely terrified. I was sobbing hysterically. I was so scared. I didn't know what it was going to be like. They said the procedure is about 30 minutes. They said it won't be a big deal. You'll be talking. You'll fall asleep. If any of you have been under anesthesia, it's normal, right? And so we were going into it with 4, knowing that we had 4 follicles, knowing that we had 4 potential eggs. And so they wheeled me back to the surgical room, and I'm laying back on the table, and they've got this TV screen, which is kind of cool because you can see a lot of what's going on. And then, of course, I fell asleep. They wheeled me out to the recovery room, and when I woke up, the nurse was standing right there with me, and Stephen was sitting in the chair. And anesthesia is a funny thing. I looked over and I said, "Did you do your part?" The nurse just started laughing. So obviously the man has to give his sample because in IVF, they create the embryos in the lab and in a petri dish. So they take the eggs and then they take the man's sample. And there's different ways of doing it. My clinic did it in a way that's called ICSI, which is where they fish out and find the highest quality sperm. And then they take a needle, and it's fascinating. There's actually a lot of videos of it on YouTube and on TikTok. And they actually take the high quality sperm and then they actually inject it into the egg so that they meet and they fertilize. There's other clinics that they put the egg and some sperm in a petri dish and just let them fertilize naturally. So it just kind of depends on how your clinic does it and what your preferred method is. So Stephen had done his part, so we were good. And the doctor came in and said that we actually got 5 eggs, which was 1 more than we expected. And we were just absolutely elated. We saw it as a huge win. We were so excited. For people who have other diagnoses or other reasons to go down IVF, you'll quickly learn that IVF is very much a numbers game because there's a lot of statistics behind everything and it's very much science. So compared to the people that I've met through this process and whatnot, 5 eggs wasn't a lot, but for us, it was more than we expected. So the next step in the process is then to see how many eggs are mature. So they pull them from their follicles, and you have to make sure that the eggs are mature in order for them to be fertilized. Then you sit around and wait. Within 24 hours, our clinic said that they would call us and let us know how many were matured and how many were fertilized. So we got the call the next morning, and I vividly remember we were sitting on the couch at my dad's house when they called, and they said that only 1 egg was mature and only that 1 egg had fertilized. The fact that only 1 egg matured only that 1 egg was mature was devastating because that meant that we only had the 1 chance. The fact that that 1 egg fertilized was a miracle because there's statistics in how many mature eggs will actually fertilize. So we were kind of like really upset, but also very hopeful at the same time. So then after that, they told us that they would call us back within 7 days to see if that fertilized egg would turn into an embryo or a blastocyst. So like the 2-week wait, we were waiting for 7 days, 1 week wait to find out. And they called us. I was sitting at my desk at work. It was a Thursday and it was about 10 a.m. I remember everything of this day. And a number that I didn't know was calling me, which I don't normally answer. And I had also had all of the doctor's numbers saved in my phone. So I thought it was really weird. But I answered it just because I was like listening to myself. And I was like, let's answer this. And it was Doug. And it was Doug from the lab. And he said, I called and I wanted to let you know that you have a perfect embryo. And the adrenaline that went through my body is something I will never be able to explain. I literally got up out of my office, and at this point I was working at a resort, and I was speed walking back and forth down the hallway outside. I went and I was working by a creek. I went and sat by the river, and I couldn't sit still. I couldn't believe the words that he just told me. And I just kept saying to him, "Are you serious? Are you serious? Are you serious?" And he's like, "It's the most perfect, most beautiful embryo I've ever seen." He's like, "I'm so happy to be calling you." And I was just like, "Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Doug. Like, this is the best news I've ever gotten in my life." Because statistically speaking, we should have never gotten to that point. And I called Steven and we couldn't breathe. We were just so excited. And I called my dad, and Steven called his parents, and we were just, I mean, I don't remember anything that happened the rest of the day, but because we were so high on adrenaline at that point. And so Doug tells me, he's like, "Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to send it off for genetic testing. And then, the results of that should be back within 3 weeks. And then we can plan for your embryo transfer." Every embryo gets graded. And different clinics have different ideas of grading, but they're all relatively similar. And so our embryo was given the best grade. It's based off of their growth, their shape, their things of that sorts. And embryos have to have a certain amount of cells. So ours was given the best grade. When you look it up, if your embryo has a certain grade, there's better statistics of how likely it is to result in a live birth. And so we were just like, "Hey, this is awesome. We've got the best graded embryo. We're going to hang out. It's going to go do its thing. In the genetic testing process, we're going to find out if it's a boy or a girl, and then we'll transfer the embryo and we'll get pregnant, and it's going to be awesome." So again, very hopeful and optimistic. So each day passed and passed and passed, and finally we got to 2 weeks and 6 days. So right before that 3-week mark. And I was driving home from work, and it said that my doctor was calling. I was like, "Oh my gosh, it's time finally." So he called. And he said, "Leeah, I'm sorry to tell you that your embryo is abnormal, and we won't be able to go in the process." I had about 20 minutes left in the car before I got home, and I started screaming, and I was shaking. And I don't know that I can even put into words how I felt, because it was so crushing and devastating. And then I had to go home and tell Steven. And I got home and I walked in the door and I just collapsed into his arms and I said, "We lost our embryo. We lost our little baby girl." And we collapsed on the kitchen floor and just sat there holding each other, because that was our chance. We didn't know if we would have another opportunity to get pregnant. We didn't know what the future held. I remember being angry and heartbroken and confused and questioning everything as to why we went through that all. Why were we given such a glimmer of hope? Why did we get a perfect embryo that wasn't going to be our baby? For anybody going through any sort of loss, I will always empathize with that. I think loss magnifies in so many different ways, and never in my life did I think that losing an embryo would have the impact that it did. And I think it's given me such a different perspective and ability to empathize with people who do go through any sort of loss. And I really, at this point, really appreciated my friend Kelly, who said, you were a mom of an embryo. Any woman who wants to be a mom is a mom. Any woman who has a miscarriage is a mom. And it was reframing so much for me at that point. And I appreciated that, and I needed it. Stephen and I took the next day off of work. We couldn't do it. We had to be together and kind of figure out what was going on. We jumped on a call with our doctor the next day to kind of go over the lab results and see what, if anything, there was that we could do for us moving forward. He said that we could try another round of IVF and that he would, quote unquote, throw the kitchen sink at it. He said it would be a little bit more expensive because there would be additional medications involved. I wasn't immediately on board. The heartache that I experienced when we lost that embryo, I would honestly compare to the passing of my mother. The financial implications of fertility treatments. I couldn't stomach us having to go through that again. Our insurance didn't cover anything financially, so everything we had to pay for out of pocket. The injections, they hurt. They're not fun. Side note, on our first round of IVF, we used the wrong needle and didn't know until 2 nights before the retrieval. But it comes with a needle that's about 2.5 inches long and pretty thick. And then they give you another needle that's about 1/2 inch long, that's really thin. Well, we were using the long, thick needle the whole time, not knowing, just inflicting additional unnecessary pain physically. So I didn't know if I could go through that again. The hormones, they obviously play games with you, up and down, left and right. Started experiencing things in my body that were very uncomfortable. So I wasn't immediately on board, but Stephen was. Stephen's like, we need to do it again. So we did. We started another round pretty quickly afterwards. My next cycle started a few weeks later, and then I think we actually started the IVF cycle, because IVF, they go off of when your cycle starts, but then they throw off your cycle and make your cycle match everybody else that's doing retrievals. So they actually have what's called retrieval week, where everybody's going through it at the same time. So they, similar to if you live in a sorority house, they sync up everybody's cycle to be on the same page. We started the second round on Stephen's birthday. And so now we are at March of 2022. Started doing the injections again. And again, going back and forth, driving 2 hours to each appointment and then driving back. The appointments were pretty similar. It would be like high follicle count, low follicle count, high follicle count, low follicle count. We actually stayed with my dad for a week of that cycle, which was really nice because then we didn't have to travel back and forth for the second week of the cycle. As we were getting closer to the retrieval, the doctor came in and said, we need to cancel your retrieval. And we said, why? He said, it's just, you're not going to get the results that we're looking for. I had 3 follicles. Like I shared earlier, our clinic's minimum was 3 follicles to do the retrieval. And he said, they're all of different sizes, so they're not consistent. That's indicating poor growth, and it's just not worth going through. So I spaced out, blacked out, kind of started trying to process this. And Stephen was like, well, and the doctor actually said, we can try again next month. And Stephen said, well, what are you going to do differently next month? He's like, honestly, I probably won't even recommend that you go through it again and that you start looking at other ways to grow your family. So other ways to grow our family, right, would be adoption, would be an egg donor. Those would probably be the best paths. So doctor stepped out, and Stephen and I don't think we really even said much of anything to each other. And he's like, well, what do you think? Do you want to try and see if we can go through this? Or, I really think we should probably just cancel. And Stephen's like, nope, we're going to do it. Okay, cool. I mean, we had gone through so much work at that point to get to where we were. And we knew that I could go through a retrieval, which isn't comfortable. It's a little painful when you wake up, and there's some Tylenol and some bed rest and things of that sorts that might help alleviate that and speed up the recovery. But yeah, Stephen just jumped in and said, we're not going to cancel. We're going to do it. So we're like, okay. So we got our time for the retrieval. We did a couple things differently that cycle. I got a little bit more acupuncture than I had before, and I got a different type of acupuncture. And like I said, the medicines were different. We did some growth hormones and then some extra supplements for egg quality and things of that sort. And so we went, did the retrieval again, and we got 4 eggs. So again, one more than they expected us to get. And so we were excited, we were hopeful, we were ready to roll. 24 hours later, we get the call. 1 egg was mature, 1 egg fertilized. So, same feelings, right? Sad that we only had the 1 chance, happy that the egg actually fertilized. So now, again, back to the waiting game. We waited 5 or 6 more days, and they called and they said that we had an embryo. And it was a perfect grade, again, the same grade as the previous embryo, actually, and that they would send it off for the genetic testing. You know, the second cycle, a lot of it felt like, okay, well, we've done this before. Be hopeful, but don't get, overly excited about anything. I'm an easily excitable person, so that's hard for me to temper that and manage it. I just kind of take everything as very positive and very exciting, and so I have to, work through that. We actually got the call this time. I think it was, so the retrieval was on April 12th. The embryo fertilized on April 13th. And then we got the call about the embryo on May 2nd. And I was in Hawaii with my dad and my sister sitting at the pool. And I got the phone call that the doctor was calling. And I answered the call. And he said, "Leeah, you have a healthy, genetically normal embryo." And the only way I can explain myself for that is like the Kool-Aid man running through a wall. I couldn't believe what he was saying. I'm pretty sure everybody at the pool overheard me saying, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, are you serious?" My dad was sitting right next to me, and I hung up with the doctor. I told my dad, I said, "We have an embryo." And my dad just started crying. My sister started crying. I have to call Steven. It's the middle of the workday for Steven. And so I called him, and we were questioning if we would look at the results or not, because the results would tell us what the gender was. I had the results on my phone, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna open them with you if you want me to, otherwise we won't look at them. And so we opened it up and saw that it was a boy. I think that's one of the things that's really crazy about the whole process, is that they can tell you if it's a boy or a girl as it's an embryo before it's in your body, when it's still in a frozen test tube in the deep freeze or the ice age. I think that's what brought the loss of the first embryo to carry so much weight, because we had names picked out for a boy or for a girl. And even just tonight, Steven called that embryo by the name that we had picked out for a girl. And I said, that's really hard when you do that. And so I think that's something I never expected to experience. So of course, back to being on the phone with the doctor. The doctor's like, "We're not all the way there yet. Still got things we've got to go through." I'm like, "Okay." And I said to him, I was like, "Yeah, dude, but we're a lot closer than last time." So again, I said, I'm a very excitable person. I was very excited. I went on a walk. It was probably more like a run on the beach in Hawaii, just trying to work through all of my excitement of getting that phone call that we had made it that far. I actually had pulled up the other day the finalized lab results, because I thought it was so interesting to actually look back at my clinic statistics. And this is specific to my clinic. Every clinic is very different. You can find a lot of information regarding clinic success rates online, and it is through it's assisted reproductive technology, and there's a society for it, but you can find a lot of individual clinic statistics there. And so I was looking back at the statistics from our clinic. And it says, our statistics show that 75 to 80% of eggs retrieved will be mature. So we got 1 out of 4, 25%. 75 to 80% of those mature eggs will fertilize normally. So we had one mature egg and one fertilized normally. So that was 100%. And then it says, however, specific factors may influence these rates. Statistically, we expect 40 to 50% of fertilized embryos to achieve good quality blastocyst development. However, specific variables may influence these rates. Again, I just thought that those statistics were interesting because it really showed that we were kind of behind the process. But then at the same time, we also caught up because our one egg fertilized. So I asked the doctor, I said, so what do we do next? And the next step in the process is the embryo transfer. Similar to the egg retrieval, you're on a bunch of medications. The embryo transfer, you go on this lovely medication called progesterone and oil, PIO shots. And they are a very big shot that's intermuscular in the lower back upper quadrant of your bottom. And they are very uncomfortable. The oil is actually really thick, and so that's what makes it really uncomfortable. I was given some tips and tricks on how to make those better and less painful, one of them being to put a heating pad on the area before and after the injection, which was a lifesaver. There's, again, the suppositories, the injections, all of that go along with preparing your body for the embryo transfer. I did a lot. I changed a lot of my life through our fertility journey. Pretty extreme. And I actually think all for the positive, because now I've made a lot of lifestyle changes that I really do believe benefit myself and our family. But then I continued to do a lot of things leading up to the embryo transfer to try and secure our chances of the embryo actually implanting. So we did have a high quality embryo, which that's when grading does come into play. Higher quality embryo has a better success rate of implanting, but the grading isn't the only indicator. And I know plenty of stories and people who have had lower graded embryos that have resulted in successful live births. And I say live births because that's how they measure a lot of reproductive technology statistics, is based off of the results being on live births. And so we were leading up to the embryo transfer, and I subscribed to every wives' tale. I ate pineapple every single day. I drank red raspberry leaf tea. I did certain yoga poses. I ate a certain way. I did all of that because this was our chance. We had to put it all on the line. We couldn't risk anything, and we would do whatever possible. I continued to do acupuncture. I found a great clinic actually in the Phoenix area that did acupuncture for fertility. So I started seeing them more during my cycle as I was leading up to the embryo transfer, because they would do certain techniques that would help with the transfer. It's very common in IVF to do acupuncture immediately before the embryo transfer and immediately after. And so that was something that I signed up to do. Now, the embryo transfer is in the same room as the egg retrieval, on the same table, but it's not under anesthesia or anything. They do give you Valium to release or to relax your uterus. I'm not somebody who really takes any sort of pain relief medication, so that was really extreme for me. Having Valium and acupuncture at the same time, I was very relaxed. And so after my acupuncture session in the doctor's office, the acupuncturist actually comes to the doctor's office. And so after my session, then they take you to the embryo transfer. And again, it's all very timed. So I think they do the transfer within 15 minutes of ending your acupuncture session. It's high security to make sure you're getting the right embryo. So the embryologist comes out and says, I have Leeah's embryo. And then the nurse says, I have Leeah's embryo. And then the doctor says, I have Leeah's embryo. And then they do it again. They all just look at it. They're not passing it through each other, but they all just look at it to make sure that they're verifying. And then the doctor takes it and puts it in the tube. The doctor starts to try to transfer the embryo, and he goes, man, you've got a small and difficult cervix. And I immediately panicked because I'm like, he's not going to be able to get this in. He's not going to be able to get the embryo in because of my small cervix. And we know that I have a small cervix, and I had talked about it with like some of the nurses at the clinic. And so I immediately panicked and grabbed Steven's hand and just squeezed it, hoping for the best. And the doctors, they're incredible. They work with so many different situations. And so I was like, okay. And he's like, just breathe, just breathe. And he got it in there. And so, as I mentioned, there's that big TV. You can see him taking the embryo and putting it in there. And then on the TV, he points out where the embryo lands. So, although this process is so hard and challenging, I know the exact minute that I got pregnant on the exact day. And I saw a picture of our embryo before he was put inside us. And those are things that I really try to hold on to because the process sucks. IVF, infertility, it's terrible, it's hard, it's not fair, it's unexplained. There's no rhyme or reason why people go through it. It impacts so many people. And so to find the small things like that were the things that I had to focus on. And so do the embryo transfer, and we were supposed to stay with my dad for a couple of days during the embryo transfer, and he got COVID. So we ended up having to stay at a hotel because one of the old wives' tales or myths, or however you want to call it, was that you shouldn't change in elevation after a transfer. And that's not scientifically based. And I know people who jump on airplanes after they have an embryo transfer. So there's nothing to be concerned about there. But I subscribed to it. And so I stayed in the Phoenix area for 6 days after our transfer. And you're supposed to rest. So I didn't work. And I stayed at the hotel and I watched like 3 seasons of Below Deck. I watched Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, just trashy TV, and hung out and tried to keep it easy and continue to eat my things and do whatever. So you go in for some testing after the embryo transfer to just, again, they kind of adjust your medications, but they can't tell you anything hormonally until that 2-week wait has happened. So it's still the same timeline for a pregnancy test there. They encourage you not to take them at home because the hormones are so different. They can also throw a false positive or a false negative either way. And so I really did stick with that. I didn't take a pregnancy test early at all. I rested, I relaxed. Like I said, I really didn't do much. Our pregnancy test was on June 15th, and we did it in Northern Arizona at one of our local labs. Oh, the joys of life in a small town. The doctor ordered the test, and it was a stat test, which means you're supposed to get results in less than 4 hours. And the results are supposed to be sent to the nurse at the clinic. Then the nurse will call and let you know the results. We got to the clinic right at 6 o'clock in the morning. The first one's in to get my blood draw. And we're like, okay, here we are. This is what it is. I was wearing a shirt that said positive vibes. We're embracing all of it. And so 10 o'clock came and passed. 10 o'clock was a 4-hour mark, and it was gone. And we were like, okay, we still don't have the results. Know what we're going to do. When are we going to get them? We called the nurse, said, have you gotten the results? And we haven't gotten them yet. No, the nurse hasn't gotten the results. And so we're just sitting there waiting. And I was sitting on my laptop, and at 10:46 a.m., I got an email from the lab with the results, which is not supposed to happen. The results are supposed to go to the nurse, and then the nurse is supposed to call me. Now, because I had been through 2.5 years of all sorts of blood draws, tests, anything imaginable, I had become an expert at Dr. Google and was able to read lab work and understand it pretty well. The email came, and Stephen had done a little bit of research on what we were looking for in the lab. So he came over to me on the computer at the kitchen table, and we opened the results. I started shaking and crying right away, and Stephen said, "That means pregnant, doesn't it?" And I couldn't believe it. Didn't think that we would get to that point. It's amazing that we did. And that our little miracle baby made it here. I know we're going to talk about pregnancy on another episode, but I ended up having a high-risk pregnancy. And after we calculated all the statistics involved, this little guy had less than a 15% chance of being here and being who he is today. And so while I think statistics are helpful, are insightful, I don't think that they're everything. And I think that there's always miracles and there's hope and there's chances and there's reasons to believe. And I know that there are so many others out there who have gone through 5, 6, 7 rounds of IVF and are still waiting. I'm sad for that and people's biggest cheerleaders. And please, if anybody is listening to this and is going through infertility, please send us an email because I would personally like to send you a little gift that was sent to me when I went through this process, and I would love to send it your way. June 15th of 2022, we found out that we were pregnant. I'm sure I left out a lot of things. Lisa, you were there the whole way. So if there's anything that you remember that I don't, please chime in. One thing that I do remember is that the day after we lost our first embryo, a big bag from Whole Foods showed up with trashy magazines, ice cream, cookies, wine, all of the things from this group of girls. And that was amazing. It was all of my favorite things that I love so much. And it was so sweet and thoughtful. And I remember telling you guys along the process, we were at Allie's house when we found out that we had the embryo, and we were talking about it over our charcuterie boards and wine. And I'm so grateful for the support system that we had in place and that we utilized it, especially on the second round. I was so insecure that people were going to judge me for not being able to get pregnant naturally, and especially with the way that I was raised. The way I was raised, you get married at 22, 23, you have kids at 24, and that's just the life that you have. And to not be following down that path was really hard for me. But the more that I opened up and shared with people, the more I found connection with others. That was really helpful for both Stephen and the process. Somebody told me to reframe this as it's not my story, it's Wes's story. And I think that that is very sweet and very true because it is the road that we get to where we are today. And even though it was heartache and there were a lot of tears, the little guy is pretty awesome and totally worth it.
I was at your wedding, so I've been with you, and friends with you through the whole situation. And it was just like, this is the month. I remember us we hiked Humphreys. We hiked the highest point in Arizona together, and we were talking about it for a while, and it was like, it's gonna happen, and then being inexperienced in IVF and not knowing anything about it except for from you. And man, you are the most researched person I've ever met in my life. Like, you know everything about everything. Like, when I would talk to you about stuff going on with me, you're like, oh, that's this, and this. And it's like, it was really cool to have you in my corner, like backing me up with all of the statistics and helping me out with my stuff. But you going through the emotional heartache, every time I knew something was coming up and you were going to get results, it was like, oh, like I would have, I mean, obviously not anywhere near the emotions that you did, but like I would have those butterflies in my stomach just waiting for your text. And I didn't want to text because if something bad happened and you were processing it the way you were, I didn't want to be the source of like, let's make this bad again. You're already lived it, but it was like, come on, like this has to happen for them. This has to happen for them. They're such good people. Or, she's been through so much. Like, come on, let's let this happen. And I remember, unfortunately, Stephen and I have very similar outlooks on things, and the negative is really weighs in our brains a lot more than the positive. And I kept being like, all right, I'm going to stay positive for them because I need to do that. Like I have a really hard time staying positive, but for you guys, it was just like, like, come on. So I just, you are so strong. And I said in the last episode, like, I don't know that I could go through what you went through. Like, though I remember seeing the post of all of the shots that you took, and I was like, I don't think I could have made it through that. Like, that was incredible that you did that. And I remember asking you if you were pregnant, and I was like, I need to know, I need to know. And it was just like, again, like we've talked about, when you found out I was pregnant and vice versa, I was like over the moon. Like, you'd think I was pregnant. I was so excited. It was so awesome. But it was a long journey. I mean, 3 years is a long time when you think about every month going by, and 36 months, that's a long time. 36 times of being disappointed. Like, you're incredible that you did that. And I do think that people are starting to open up and tell their stories more and more now. But I was thinking, and I said this to Brandon today when we were talking about this episode, is like, I hope people reach out to you and get the support, because you have been the most supportive person in my corner in all situations, not just pregnancy, but like, I hope that they get an opportunity to be pumped up by Leeah, because you are so optimistic and awesome through this whole process. It's incredible. It's really awesome. And I'm so thankful you were able to tell this story instead of like, I look at this podcast as our opportunity to essentially have a yearbook for ourselves, right? Like, we can go back and be like, wow, I didn't remember Hannah peeing all over Brandon's clothes, or you know what I mean? Like, those not, but like, I think that's awesome that you were able to document this, and we have a record of this, because people should hear this. And I think it's going to help a lot of people. And I'm excited for that.
I couldn't agree more. As I was listening, I was kind of writing down a couple of reflections, and then I had a question for you at the end. I've always known this, but like, you are so strong and such an inspiration. Like, your journey was long, arduous, complex, expensive, at the same time, like, just so, so, so powerful. So powerful. And I'm really, I'm trying to use the word sorry. Like, it's tough to hear how it was so isolating and exhausting, and really, for the most part, everything until the end, it was devastating, right? Like, I'm so sorry that you went through that. As Lisa said, 36 times, and that's just 36 months times a million times you actually had this moment of hope, and then disappointment on top of that. Another reflection I had was like, as you're sharing your story, I'm just continuously in awe of science. I've been in awe of science, throughout my journey as well, but like, from your initial tests to navigating the different approaches to conception to the IVF journey in itself. And that includes the retrieval. And then, like you said, being able to do a genetic screen on an embryo. And then, of course, the pregnancy and birth. It's just fascinating and incredible. It's just awesome that we are able to get that information. I'm sure it wasn't awesome to take all these medications as you walk through, but like, it led you to Wesson. And I think that is so incredible. And Stephen's great. I've always known that. But I do want to echo, I think he was a representation of a really awesome, extremely supportive partner in this. I got chills in the moment, and you were like, we didn't really talk. It was such a heartbreaking moment. And the doctor came in and asked what we want to do. And without missing a beat, he was like, we're going again, and we're doing it again. And that's the beauty of having a strong partner and being able to like let someone speak when you're too weak to speak, right? And vice versa. And we do that for other ways, and giving you that strength to keep pushing on, because as hard as it is for the spouse in this situation, like, you're physically going through all this. And then the last thing is just your quote that also gave me chills is, anyone who's had an embryo as a mom, and anyone who's had a miscarriage as a mom, and that reframing that you just echoed is just, it's perfect. It is a journey we're all going through, and motherhood looks extremely different for everybody. And I just think that was a really interesting thing to look at the positive. I'm just so excited that the happy ending was Wesson, and and that our little kiddos can play peekaboo behind the bookshelf every day. And thank you.
I was just gonna thank you also for sharing your story. I've known friends that have went through IVF, and I wasn't a mom at the time, and just thinking about it now, I wish I had asked more questions. I wish I had been more supportive. I don't think I realized everything that you had. Like, I had a little bit of an idea, but not like your story was very powerful. Our mute buttons were on. I know I was crying. I saw Michelle crying. Lisa, you were probably crying too. I know, and our listeners are probably felt that too. And I just, like everything Michelle just said, like, I agree with. And I haven't got to meet Wesson yet, but when I do, I want to give him a big hug because he's a miracle. And I had chills. And I really appreciate you sharing your story. And I know that people are going to hear this and just mothers and women who are going through this. I think you're really going to help them not feel so alone. I'm sorry. I'm like, I don't have the words, you know, it's hard for me to even come up with the words, but you are a very strong individual, and like, I'm just in awe.
Thank you all for giving me this space and this outlet. I didn't know how it was going to go. I was going to approach it, and I'm sure I'm going to listen back to this and be like, gosh darn it, I sound so silly there. But a couple of things. So there was 191 injection needles in that picture, Lisa, that you saw.
You can't see me on the podcast, like holding my head in my face, like, oh my gosh, 191. Continue, because I'm sure I'm going to keep doing this.
60 appointments at the clinic over the course of our fertility treatments.
And is that 60 times in Phoenix, basically? So add 4 hours of driving?
I think we had like 4 or 5 that were virtual.
Oh my gosh.
So all of the other appointments were driving down there. And like I said, the second round, we did stay with my dad for a week. So that was like 4 appointments that we didn't commute for. So let's say 50 that we commuted 2 hours to each way, which is really not uncommon. A lot of people will travel very far for clinics. In fact, I know, and I use the term know very loosely. Women I follow on Instagram that I've communicated with via chat on Instagram a handful of times, travel to different states, travel across borders. I'm from the US who goes to Canada and vice versa. So it's not uncommon to travel for fertility treatments. And then Michelle, in awe of science, amazed by it. I think it's the most incredible thing, the technologies of science. We often talk about who decided they were going to take an egg out of a woman and take man's sperm and create a baby outside of a body. Blows my mind all the time. But it cracks me up because my father-in-law, whenever we are with him and we have Wes, when Wes meets somebody, he always says, isn't it amazing he was made in a petri dish, to everybody, to every single person, whether they are soliciting it or not. And it cracks me up because it's so consistent. But my father-in-law works in the grocery industry, and we were up there visiting him at work one day, and he was carrying Wes around, and he's like, he was made in a petri dish. He was made in a petri dish. And I just think so science is amazing. It allows a lot of opportunities for things that may not have been attainable many years ago. But I just wanted to share that because I think it's hilarious. And it's very true. He was made in a petri dish.
I was going to end kind of maybe with one question here. And I guess my question just to end up is like, I know it took you a while to start opening up to others, but like what type of support was the most helpful? And, you know, knowing that a lot of people you've met through would have various degrees of understanding your journey from different angles, what was the most helpful? And then was there anything that was like counterproductive that was frustrating in the process?
Toxic positivity is not helpful. Like I said, I'm a very hopeful person. I believe everything in life happens for a reason, down to my core. So I'm positive on my own. That was part of the reason that opening up was so hard, is because I didn't want to hear, oh, it's going to happen for you, or, oh, why don't you just adopt, or, you know, oh, you're such good people. It's going to work, and this is going to be great. And it's just not helpful. I know that people's intentions are good. And so I always try and credit people with that. What's helpful so much more is, I'm sorry you're going through that. Wow, that must be really hard. I can't imagine the experience that you're having right now. Do you want to talk about it? Do you not want to talk about it? How can I support you best? Because support looks different for everybody. For me, support was going on walks with Lisa, was going and hiking the hardest mountain in Arizona when it was 50-mile-per-hour winds, and we lost my hat because it blew off my head and we had to climb to the summit on all fours. Support looks different for everybody, and I think asking people what type of support they need is really important. So I guess that's what really helped, was the people who would be like, how can I support you best? Or, I'm sorry you're going through this. Or, you know, Lisa, I know you said that you hesitated to ask sometimes, but I just wanted to word vomit. You were one of the people closest to me as I was going through this, and I wanted to tell you everything because I needed to tell somebody, but I didn't want to broadcast it. That was helpful. And Stephen was incredible. I don't think I could have gone through this with any other partner or person. He was so strong and so furiously supportive and believing in us and that what was meant to be was going to happen. And he was incredible. He did every single one of my shots. He mixed all of the drugs. He made sure they were the right temperature, the right texture, they were done on the right time. He looked out for everything. I mean, he managed our calendar. He did it all. So he was incredibly supportive, and it's a crappy thing to go through, but I do think that it definitely brought us together more as partners.
That's another thing that I'm hopeful in the years to come is that there's more support for the men on that side, because I do think it's very difficult for men in general to open up and talk to each other, but that is something that is very emotionally taxing, and you can talk to your spouse or partner or whatever you have, about that. But it's also nice to sometimes have somebody on the outside to talk to, and I can only imagine how isolating that can be as the partner as well, not the person going through all of that. I'm hopeful for that future.
It's taboo. I don't know why, right? There's no reason for it to be taboo, but guys go through it too. It's not just one-sided. Each of you needs support, however that looks best.
This has been awesome. I feel like once this gets out, there will be so many questions that'll come in about this and how so many things. I think it's going to be awesome, and I'm excited for people to hear it.
Well, thank you all for listening. Thank you so much for giving me the space to share my story. If you or anyone you know is struggling with infertility, please reach out to us. Michelle, where can they find us?
They can find us on Instagram at Mom Jeans the Podcast or on email. So that is just hello@momjeansthepodcast.com. Our website is live, so that's another way you can contact us via there too. So exciting stuff, and we're here and we want to hear from you about your journeys, and maybe we can take a few questions on the next one, or dedicate a whole episode to this as well, and hear some of our listener stories.
And that wraps up this week's episode of Mom Jeans, trying to fit into motherhood. We hope that you enjoyed this episode. Thank you so much for listening.